Elise Weber's interdisciplinary work explores issues of queer identity, history, and culture. She uses painting as a way to portray LGBTQIA+ icons and stories, while through her photography and performance, she connects individually with members of her community to explore the many facets of contemporary queer identity. Weber's work has remained focused on body politics throughout her career, and she has exhibited throughout the United States and France. And you had a piece in the Access jury show, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, I actually was awarded one of the juried prizes. So
yeah, it was a really
thank
nice
you to the juror.
I remembered seeing it. So when I was looking through who I was interviewing today, I was like, oh, she had that cool piece in the Access show. So this will be fun. Yeah. And you have the piece behind you is huge. That's a lot bigger than the work of yours that I've seen.
Yes, this is actually the largest piece I've ever done. It extends all the way down the wall. It's just a little less PG down on that side. This is about 12 feet by about 5 feet. I just recently moved into a new studio this summer. During all of COVID, I got a wonderful opportunity to move into this great house that has a full basement that I've turned into my studio.
That's great.
I'm so excited about it. So I had this entire wall to be able to work with, and I've always wanted to do, ideally, I would love to be able to do like an entire room in this style and like fill the walls and have it spill out onto the floors and maybe branch off onto the ceiling. But for now, we'll stick with 12 feet.
Well, and it also seems like it would lend itself well to a mural application. I mean, I think the idea of making it environmental is really cool. But I also think that having it just giant on a wall or something would be really neat.
Yeah. Like I said, I've always wanted to work this large, and I'm so happy that I can now. It's so much work. As you can see, I'm still working on it. I did some painting on the live stream yesterday during my open studio. And so I did a little Bob Ross action and did some narration and painting, and it was really great.
Well, and so that leads me to a question about, the body of work that you're pursuing and how it is, because I've seen several of your pieces recently. And so I'm curious how you're coming to your compositions, what's informing what you're doing. You have a very specific aesthetic and palette that you're using over and over again in some of these works. And so I'm curious how all of these things are informing themselves and what you're pursuing.
Yeah, so it started off as an exploration of human connection and how we connect with one another physically and emotionally. And the forms are, I was really inspired by the fauves, that idea of breaking things down to their minimal form, breaking things down to show the base color and the expression of the form as opposed to an accurate representation. Because most of these works, especially the one behind me here, this is an ode to Stonewall and the Stonewall Rebellion. And so this isn't, I wasn't working off of specific photographs. I wasn't working off of specific imagery. What I was doing was I read through a few books, one of which being the Stonewall Reader, where it was firsthand accounts of people who were active in the movement and who were at the Stonewall riot when it erupted. And so like here we have the Stonewall girls who helped to block the police by canning in front of them and freaking them out. And we've got the women in celebration, of being able to be visible and being able to be seen, but also the fire behind them showing this kind of rebellious ecstasy that happens in this kind of movement and the liberation that happens in this kind of movement. So I really want it to be all about that feeling and the expression as opposed to an accurate historical event. So I've been playing around with color a lot. I read through Alber's color theory when I started getting into painting. So that's really informed a lot of the compositional elements and the color elements, the idea of having colors like right behind me here, the pink with the red with the yellow, creating that vibration, the visual vibration.
Right.
Yeah, it's very, very stimulating to the eye. It helps your eye travel around the piece and helps to activate the cones and rods and all of those things to help keep you moving and keep you engaged with the piece.
Well, so, yeah, I'm curious about, you mentioned visibility and as you were describing this, you know, the visibility of the individuals in the painting and the narratives that are being told. And there's so much dialogue going on right now, you know, in all areas of society about representation and how we're communicating with each other and how equitable we're being and what we're doing. And I'm curious, you know, because of the themes that you're working through in this work, you know, how do you see yourself in that conversation, and what sorts of things do you want to see for your work? I mean, how do you want it to function? How do you want it to be represented or respected, or, you know, what are your views on these dialogues right now?
Great. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I actually went through a whole turmoil in my head last night while thinking about that exact idea of how I want my work to play a role in this visibility. And a lot of my work in the past has been very loud and very, not loud visually, now it's loud visually, but much more political and much more confrontational. And I think that now I'm really moving into more of a celebration format, as opposed to, I'm going to convince you that I'm right and that we should all be equal. Because yes, we should all be equal. There should be no bias against sexual identity or race identity or any of these intersectional identities that we exist in. So what I think I'm working towards is creating a space and creating work that when someone who identifies with that particular identity walks in, that they can see themselves reflected in the work. And I've been, as far as my gum portraits, the photographs that I've been doing interviews with queer people all around Sacramento. And I'm going to continue this project for years, but I'm interviewing them about identity and when they've seen themselves portrayed in the world and how it has impacted who they are and how they express themselves. And for most of the people that I interview, they have only recently or have never seen their identity portrayed in art, media, any of that. So I think that's what I'm working towards. I want to create work that people can see themselves in, that people can feel seen, and create that visibility for my community.
Well, and I remember a couple years ago when we did the exhibition with Black Salt Collective, and we had an interview with Adie Robinson, who is a Black artist. And, you know, she was saying, I want to be able to depict joy as well. You know, she was saying yes, of course, my identity informs my work and it informs some of the shows that I'm in and some of these things. But at the same time, sometimes I want to make a piece that is just about whatever, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be because of an activist message that I'm trying to send or whatever. I just want to be able to pursue things in the same way that, you know, say a white male artist could just pursue the concept of color, you know, doesn't have to pursue the work as a white male artist and make all of his work about his identity. And so I just think, you know, there is that combination of wanting to be able to carve out a place, but at the same time be able to feed the joy that you want to be seen represented in your work and your life and exchanged with your community at the same time. You know, it's like it's this balancing act in terms of feeding these different needs in a way that is feeding you, I guess, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it.
And I grew up in Southern Alabama and had no visual representation of what a queer community was or how one could be queer and still exist in the world. So it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but it's really rewarding to be able to have conversations with my friends and with my community, people I don't know that I'm meeting at events, and who can look at my work and they can see themselves and they can see the joy and they can see the expression without it having to be all of us just screaming at a wall trying to get our place in the world.
Right. So that you're celebrating yourselves in addition to, you know, having difficult conversations, you know, because you don't want to get outrage fatigue. You also want to celebrate yourself, you know, which you should.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, so when you're exhibiting and when you're pursuing exhibition opportunities and things, how can people engage with your work? You know, I know you have a website.
Yes. I do have my website, and I also have an Instagram specifically for my work, and that's at elise.weber. It's on the Verge directory. My website is also on the Verge directory. And I do, pre-COVID, I was working with creating like performances to actually engage with the audience, my audience. I was actually taking it out of the art space and bringing it into kind of like normal spaces. Like I did a performance at a coffee shop at like an open mic, and everyone's doing comedy, and I'm sitting there holding people's hands and looking into their eyes and giving them a connection. And
That's
I
rad
really
though. That's so perfect.
yeah, and I want to be able to create activating spaces. So like I went to TGTG's show last night, really great. I got there early so that way I wouldn't have too many people around. And I loved the fact that you could like walk in between all of the pieces and like activate yourself in the space. And that's the kind of thing I want to create. So yes, I'm making flat pieces, I'm making two-dimensional work, but I'm also making
But this
like
one is on like
work.
I was gonna say, that looks like it's on a piece of silk.
Yes, so this is all hand-dyed silk. And again, they depict the same similar themes as in the paintings, but this work really activates in the space. You can illuminate it from behind. As you walk around it, you get this flowing movement. It's like the piece is breathing, and you can see through it ever so slightly. So if this were in a space and there were people in front of behind, you wouldn't only see the piece, but you'd see the people through the piece,
Moving around
which I think
it.
is a really interesting use.
And depending on how you light it as well. So then you're also
Mhm.
kind of grounding the viewer within the narratives that you're depicting in the work that you're creating, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. I'm looking to see like, how do you fit in? How do we all fit in? How can we interact with this work and find either solidarity or perhaps a new perspective for someone who may not be as familiar with the ideas and the movements that I'm discussing.
Well, and I think that that gets to, this has been an ongoing conversation, and something that, Verge has always been very committed to emphasizing work by a variety of communities and making sure that we're kind of breaking out of the traditional norms that have the patriarchy that has dominated the art world for centuries. But during this time, we've been talking about how we can make sure we're even going deeper into that, so that it's not just a matter of representation, but it's also dialogue. And I think having those conversations about where, like you said, where do we all fit in, and how do we want to be represented, how do we want to be respected, how do we amplify each other,
Exactly.
these are all
because you can have diversity, but diversity without inclusion is just for show. It's just aesthetic.
Right.
So how can we incorporate these voices into our work and into our organizations to actually have them visible?
Yeah, and I think in representation in the arts, that's an incredibly important conversation. There's so many of us. I graduated from art school in 2008, and so as an undergrad, as a grad student, undergrad 2005. And so, at that point, there was still very much the canon was a bunch of white guys. If you look at every single art movement, it was always grounded around a bunch of cis, straight, white males. And so, I think all of us are having to kind of reprogram ourselves and start asking questions about, well, what about all those other people in the world that were making art too? Where were they? Yeah, like they were doing something. Why, what, So anyway, well, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time, and I have enjoyed all of the conversations I've had tonight so much. And it's also been awesome to get an opportunity to talk to you and meet you, because I've seen your name and I've seen your work, but this is, I think, the first time that we've ever really talked. So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you so much for including me in all of this. I've been having a wonderful weekend. I've met so many new people, and it's just been so wonderful to have this online format and have everyone be safe, but also be able to engage and show new things.
I'm so glad to hear that, because this has been such an experiment. So I'm really glad that that's the case. So awesome. We'll continue to be safe. And thank you so much for talking tonight. And yeah, nice meeting you.